Okay, everybody, thank you for coming along. I'm Dan Nicholson. I am the science manager for the Los Amigos Biological Station. So my idea for this session was basically to kind of introduce people to what a field station is, what we do at my field station at Los Amigos, and kind of open it up to the floor to kind of have a discussion about ideas that people might have about some of the things that I've said. So a lot of the topics, I will be quite brief on what I'm discussing. There's a lot more to Los Amigos than what I am just saying right now. So I love field stations. I have always loved field stations. They are a fantastic blend of nature and infrastructure. And while this ratio may shift depending on what field station you are at, they are always formative places for science, for education, and for conservation. Conservation and the threats related to it are ever-changing. So I kind of want to have a discussion about what that means for field stations and how we might want to move forward and what ideas we need to improve, to make the magic happen, but to stay up to date with the problems and the technology that we have. So field stations started back in 1843 at Rothamsted in the UK. And while this was originally an horticultural site, it still continues today, and there's a lot of work on insect ecology as well as crop cycling as well. But in the 1950s and the 1960s, field stations really started to take off and became more popular. And we now have over 1,200 distributed across 120 different countries around the world, and they cover nearly all of the world's ecosystems. There are even a couple that are underwater in the Miami Keys. They are a hugely important resource for conservation. So why? Why are field stations so important? Why do I care about them so much? Field stations provide critical infrastructure to answer questions and use methodologies that we might not be able to do otherwise. They give us access to long-term datasets, which are hugely important to better understand the changes that are undergoing our planet right now, and they give us access to really interesting scientific questions, and some of the most profound scientific papers have come from long-term datasets from field stations. But field stations don't just produce science. They also produce scientists. I wouldn't be here today if I hadn't started my career 16 years ago at a small field station in Honduras. So they are hugely beneficial for teaching scientists, teaching students, teaching tourists about conservation, ecology, evolution. But they also provide infrastructure and education and engagement for local communities. Some field stations even provide healthcare and infrastructure for some of their local communities. And then as conservation organizations, they are perfectly placed to face some of the worst threats that we are undergoing right now from conservation. So due to their infrastructure and their location, they are very good at educating local communities. They also very often employ local communities. Often in many places in Africa, a lot of field stations will employ former poachers as rangers, so kind of turning the whole tide on kind of some of the issues that are inherent in those systems. And certain studies have shown that field stations per square meter are one of the cheapest forms of conservation, and that there is a reduction in deforestation of around about 18% in areas around field stations in comparison to areas that don't have field stations. So what are the challenges? I told you about why everything is so good and why everything is so important, but what are the main challenges? So of course, resources. Money makes the world go round, and money is getting spread thinner. We're having issues, as I'm sure many people who were relying on NSF funding, as I was the last couple of years, are all concerned about future finances. So that's always a bigger issue. The more conservation issues we have, the more thinly spread our financial resources become. And then, of course, the logistics. One of the reasons I like field stations, and many other people like field stations, is they are remote, but this remoteness builds in an intrinsic problem. So not every field station is located in a place where it can have a genomics lab. Doesn't always work. It's not always possible. Sometimes just getting to the biological station in itself is an issue. And then what else? So equity. Field stations are a community. They are a network. They work best that way. But what happens when the dice are loaded for certain members of this community or certain members of this network? When we leave field stations behind with different technological resources, what does this mean? What impact will this have on our understanding of the ecological region? Maybe we lose a particular species because a particular field station doesn't get the right amount of tech compared to another field station. And then balance. One of the things that I love about field stations is they are so formative for people wanting to become a biologist, wanting to become a scientist, wanting to understand conservation. If a field station moves too far and we become more of a tech company, what happens to all of these skills that students, scientists, tourists, anybody could pick up when they visit a station? If everything is done by technology, what are people actually learning? What are people actually gaining? So I've told you why all these problems. So now we're going to move forward into why should we still do it despite all of these issues. So as conservationists, we are constantly exposed to issues, and new issues arise every few years, every decade. So many of the problems that we face as conservationists have a huge bankroll, whereas we do not. The political landscape is ever-changing. Even a slight political change can undo years of progress and potentially completely offset any future progress that we have. So we always need to be able to stay ahead of that, to be more efficient, to do the best work we can. And then we live in an age of misinformation where fact and fiction are often spun in different directions and mean completely different things. And we live in an era when people deny climate change, which is one of the biggest, most significant factors in conservation. So these all have hugely detrimental impacts to the science that anybody can do, but that can also be done at a field station. Okay, so I'm going to bring you down to kind of ground zero. I'm going to talk about Los Amigos now, which is kind of the case study for this. So yeah, here is the Peruvian Amazon. This is the Madre de Dios region. And then here we have the looming Leviathan, the sword of Damocles, if you will, hanging over our heads. This is La Pampa. This is the Peruvian gold mining corridor. So you can see this all used to be primary rainforest. It is now a complete wasteland. So all biodiversity pretty much destroyed. Anything that remains, any large mammals, birds, and so forth, are probably hunted out by the miners that live there. But also it gets worse. So while we have this direct destruction, the artisanal gold mining techniques that they use releases a huge amount of mercury into the system. This goes downstream, but it also goes into the atmosphere, and this has huge implications for the environment. So that's where Los Amigos is. So this brings us, we are very much right on the front line of conservation. But we aren't alone in this as well. So I should mention Manu Biological Station and Waikecha Biological Station, who are both part of the Conservation Amazonica family. But then we also have Cochacashu, which is up in Manu National Park, which is upstream of all of these issues. So it's kind of a good control group. And then, of course, we have some of our network further downstream as well. So this is Los Amigos. You can see the station down here. You can see we are very much on the front line. We have a mine right across the river from us. So this makes the education that we do, this makes the science that we do all the more important. And we are very much trying to focus on the fact of how can we better understand the mercury process, how can we better understand the detriment of the mining. So I should also mention that Los Amigos isn't just a biological station. We have the Los Amigos Conservation Concession, which is 150,000 hectare protected land owned by Conservation Amazonica, which is our neighbor. So we work very closely together with the park guards, the promotores that exist in the Los Amigos Conservation Concession. And as this combined effort over the last 25 years, we have been able to support hundreds of research projects, hundreds of publications, hundreds and hundreds of students by way of different field courses and workshops. yeah, it's been a very successful 25 years for us. Oh yeah, so let's talk about some of the technology briefly. Okay, so one of our main important resources is we have a fully functional genomics lab at Los Amigos. This allows us to get a very high quality read, a very high quality sequence of multiple species, which basically allows us to kind of track the biodiversity that we have in a very easy and effective way. It also means that we don't have to export or transport samples, and all of the data, all of the science is done in Peru by Peruvians, keeping Peruvians on publications. We also have a mercury lab. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that. We have Jessica Ortiz, who's speaking later after this, so please go along to her talk if you want more information about mercury. But we also have a lab at station, so we can process mercury samples to see how it works its way through the ecological system. So camera traps. Camera traps are the bread and butter of a field station. So we have multiple. These are, thank you to our promotores in conservation concession for these videos. So these give us a unique glimpse into the ecosystem that we have at Los Amigos. But there are inherent problems with camera traps. They are kind of old school. While they are very useful, they are kind of old school. And there's a lot of downstream processing that you need to do afterwards. So an upgrade that we have in conjunction with Microsoft and the AI for Good program, we have a Sparrow unit that is now based at Los Amigos, and we are piloting this system. So this system basically is solar powered and is linked to I nearly said Skynet then, and linked to Starlink. So, and then it is linked to solar powered camera traps as well. So basically, we don't need to go out and replace batteries. We don't need to go out and replace memory cards. Everything is automated. The camera traps send all of the information via Wi-Fi back to the system. This system then takes the photographs and it attempts to ID them. Right now, the identification system is not perfect. We're helping it learn. So yeah, you can see we have a mountain lion, a robust tapir. And then a couple of weeks into the project, we managed to get a jaguar and her cub coming through on the system. So this removes a lot of the inherent hard work that is associated with camera trapping. And then passive acoustic monitoring as well. So passive acoustic monitors, like camera traps, are fantastic at collecting a lot of data at a very low cost, but there's a lot of downstream processing afterwards. So another system that we're also piloting is the Providence project. So we have 4 units distributed across Los Amigos and the conservation concession. And this does a very similar thing to the Sparrow, where it's solar powered. It takes all of these acoustic recordings, and then it sends them back to a processing center in Spain, cutting out a lot of the work that we would need to do. And then high tech doesn't always mean high cost. So one of the things that I'm really passionate about at Los Amigos is kind of these citizen science things and citizen science projects and different tech that can be used by anybody. eBird and Merlin are fantastic resources for this. They provide standardized data sets that people can use for publications. I've used it myself. And recently we just had a workshop with Corbidi and Cornell, where we had multiple people from Peru come down to kind of learn about acoustics. And as a result of that, this year Peru is now #1 for the amount of acoustic recordings for Merlin and eBird. And then iNaturalist is probably, some people might frown upon my throwing iNaturalist in here, but I love the use of iNaturalist. It is very basic, but it's useful citizen science data or data that we can collect, and it provides things such as absence and presence data. And then Earth Ranger is a big popular one. I'm not going to go into too much detail because there's a lot of people here who know far more about it than I do. But our promoters now use Earth Ranger, and this is a fantastic free tool that our promoters and other park rangers can use to sync data in a more useful way than if they just collected it on their own. So yeah, just to kind of close out, with the changes that we have in conservation, we need to be able to adapt and stay ahead with technology and with these problems. And yeah, while field stations have a big history, we do really need to think about how we can modernize them, make the network work better, but also still keep the magic that makes a field station a field station. So I'm going to put a few discussion, I think we still have a few minutes left until lunch. So I'm going to put a few comments up if people want to kind of either discuss them now, or if you want to come and talk to me over the next few days, please do that. So yeah, if you want to think about any of these, or if you have your own questions, go for it. And yeah, thank you very much. Okay, that makes life easier for me. Yes.
That's okay. And I'll ask it in English and Spanish. My name is Catherine Saley, and I'm a biologist. I've worked most of my life in Peru. I've never been to your field station, so I hope soon I can go. My question is, I work primarily with private sector companies and monitoring programs. Are there systems, or is there a way that Los Amigos data and other data could be available as a control, or something that we could compare the success of mitigation measures with regards to biodiversity that the private sector may be monitoring? La pregunta es que si los datos de estas estaciones de investigación, si hay alguna manera para colaborar entre los proyectos de monitoreo que se pueden estar implementando con el sector privado.
I will answer in English. So I think this goes back to kind of what I was talking about, like networks. Like Los Amigos is an N of 1. We do have the conservation concession, so we kind of have this unique perspective where we have a biological station that is right next to a mining corridor, but we have this huge sweep of land that moves away from the mining corridor that is protected. So we can kind of, you could almost argue that some of the protected area is kind of like a control group, but I think the real strength will be is kind of like strengthening this network and seeing how it, like when you ask the same question across all of these stations, like how does that work?
It seems like there's a lot of opportunity still.
Yes.
That we can all work together to establish data platforms that would enable us to ask these kinds of questions and get answers.
Exactly, and it's like we have these resources, and I know that not every field station can have a genomics lab.
Exactly.
Not every station can have 150,000 hectare concession, so it's making that work for everybody else, because otherwise it's just an N of 1, and that's not always useful, and then there's other people who have expertise that we do not.
Super, thank you, very interesting presentation.
I could try shouting, but it wouldn't work. So talking about collaboration between field stations, how do you foresee practical ways to kick off this collaboration, especially with the many biological stations that are within the Manu Great Landscape, Cusco, and Madre de Dios?
Oh, good question. I mean, I'm hoping that this conference will be a good way of doing that. I know there's some people here from some of the conference, some of the field stations that I mentioned as part of the Madre de Dios network. So I'm hopefully events like this facilitate that. Ask me in a couple of days how that went. But yeah, I think just in general, like a lot of like what was asked before about like open data channels and understanding what other field stations have versus what other field stations don't have, what they need, what they can kind of, how we can help each other out, just basically like an open channel of communication. So I think that, to me, is the easiest way to kind of facilitate this kind of like back and forth on data transfer and understanding how to keep the network like strong in different places.
Sigo, ¿no? Thank you very much for the talk, Dan.
No worries.
Yo también lo voy a hacer medio bilingüe. Muchas gracias por la charla. I wanted to do a follow-up to my previous partner question in the terms of the collaboration, but probably directing it to the private sector and to the general public in the sense that because there is limited resources in terms of the financial, we should be aware to lower the competition, because in any ways we are searching for clients, meaning the researchers and like that, but we should understand that for the success of the idea, importance of the field station is for of many stations, like the ones you highlighted, somehow to reach their critical level of clients or researchers. And thank you for, I know there is initiatives that are aiming to that, but I wanted to tell everybody, if we want field stations to succeed, we need not only 1 or 2 or 3, but all that are daring to place a field station in a remote place. Decía que en realidad para que la idea de las estaciones biológicas con todas las bondades que describió Dan tengan éxito, no, hay que reducir la competencia entre ellas, ¿no? Porque si no son esfuerzos aislados y con el tiempo van a ir muriendo. So Dan, I wish you all the best. I'm here to help to articulate the communications. Financial sustainability, it's the key thing, and we should actually support each other.
Agreed.
And also, thank you, because I have worked for a few years at Cochacacho Biological Station, whose director is here, and your words resound as describing that it's a beauty to be in a remote place, but it also possesses the challenges of logistics. And this is one more reason to highlight that to the people that can support these stations, because you want them all to succeed.
Exactly, yep.
Y bueno, a los colegas acá que vienen acá porque están interesados en estaciones biológicas, ¿no? La charla de Dan para mí resuena mucho porque efectivamente los lugares remotos como Cochacayo, como Los Amigos, by the way, congratulations to ACA, because if I made my PhD, for example, it's thanks to a grant provided by ACA. So that's another service that NGOs or institutions supporting field stations should be acknowledged for. Bueno, eso era todo, and we can keep on talking later.
No worries, yep.
Howdy. Hey, Dan.
Hello, Andy. How are you doing?
I'm your old neighbor from Gamboa.
Yeah.
I had a question for field stations in the age of technology.
Go for it.
Technology breaks all the time. At your field stations, do you have like repair shops? What's the role of repair shops or maker spaces in field stations?
Oof. Regarding like tech repair stations, it's very much like we just kind of wing it. Like I brought some Arduino stuff out with me, but as far as it goes, we just kind of, and we have a lot of broken like camera traps. But I mean, we have a workshop, but that's more for like your standard maintenance. So, but at Los Amigos, we don't really do like in-house repair, which is unfortunate because, as you can imagine, and as you know, living in Panama, the death rate for any level of electronics is horrifically high, even with something as basic as camera traps. Like we lose so many of them just from normal use, let alone when we have a flood and some of them go underwater or etc. So like some form of like centralized repair hub would save us a fortune. But yeah, we don't have anything like that, unfortunately. I would love to be able to tinker with some camera traps and fix them myself, but I don't have that level of expertise.
Hi, Dan. Thank you very much for your talk. My name is Fanny Cornejo from Yuncawasi. I was thinking and listening about all this valuable information that is being obtained, but I was also wondering, how do you make the jump from the science papers and the publications that are coming out into policies or actions that governments can handle on the ground based on that data? For example, yesterday, the National Action Plan for biodiversity conservation was approved in Peru. So it's a magnificent tool that the Ministry of Environment now has for implementing different actions in the framework of the Global Agreement of Montreal Kunming and all of those things. So I was wondering if there are ways, and if your experience, which are the best ways or what has worked so far into connecting what is happening in the science part into actions that decision makers can take on the ground that are impactful for conservation.
Okay, so I've only been in this position for 4 months, so I haven't really seen the downstream, but I might, if I can I pass that one over to you, Corinne? Yes. Woo!
Hi, everyone. My name is Corinne Vriesendorp. I'm the science director at ACA, and we have Los Amigos, we have Manu Biological Station, we have Waikecha. The question that Daniela asked about how are we going to bring everyone together, we know there is this red de investigación de la biosfera, reserva de la biosfera del Manu. I think this is like a super powerful opportunity to bring field stations together. As people who run field stations are super under-resourced, so I think we need to, we will be stronger together, we need to band together. It would be great to have a conference focused on research in Manu. Marco Pastor from Suriname this morning showed all of these incredible corridors in Peru. Peru is really betting on ecological connectivity. If we could be organizing science around those mosaics, and this, I think, Fanny, is getting to your question, like how are we providing science to decision makers? Last year, we organized with a bunch of folks in this room and others a workshop on the Plan Nacional de la Conservación del Oso Andino, no? And we need to be able to provide those spaces where we can bring researchers together, folks from the Park Service, folks from SEDFOR, and figure out not only like what is the conservation status of Andean bears, but also how can we make the next plan, which is coming up, better than the first plan, right? And so I think that that's gonna take collective work. I think we have ways to improve distance to cover, like the science that we are producing at field stations, whether it's Cochacashu, whether it's Los Amigos, whether it's other stations in Peru and in South America, how do we make that transfer? And what I've seen so far is you have to be able to create the spaces for people to come together to do that. And so if you from Yunkawasi have suggestions for us, we are all ears. If other folks have suggestions for ways that we can be delivering science to decision makers, we would love to think about it with you. And for other folks running field stations, we'd love to think about how field stations remain relevant, continue to be places for people to do science, continue to be places where we can train folks, and where we can get people into the field. I love a conservation technology conference, but sort of what the woman from the biodiversity framework was saying this morning, like we need to make sure we still have human insight, we need to make sure people are still connected to observation, to seeing patterns in nature. When I was a grad student, we all wanted to spend as much time as possible in the field, and now we're seeing a real move away from that, where people want to spend as much time as possible not in the field. So for those of us who still want to stay in the field, and for folks who want to come check out Los Amigos or any of the incredible field stations in this part of Peru, bienvenidos.
Thank you, Corinne.
Hi, I'm Bjorn Bergman from SkyTruth. And so seeing that Los Amigos is really on the front lines of mining activity in Madre de Dios, I'm curious what your strategy has been for either confronting miners that have entered the Los Amigos concession, or maybe dredge mining that's going on nearby rivers, or other extractive activities.
So fortunately, we haven't had that many incursions, at least in the last couple of years, and I think there's only been one since I've been at Los Amigos, and that was more of so the great thing is, because we're kind of split, and we have the academic part, the kind of the traditional field station, which is the Los Amigos station, and then we have a station further down, which is part of the concession, and that's where our park guards work, our promotores work, and they're kind of directly on the front line, and they're the ones who deal with the coal mining issues, which makes life a lot easier for me because I don't have like the language ability. It's not ideal to send a gringo down to deal with an issue like that. So they're the ones who basically deal with all of those issues. And we've had, I think, only had like one issue recently where it was basically some miners set up a dredge mine on the edge of our property, and we were able to get some promotores down there very quickly. They kind of explained the whole situation. I think they were even using like a GPS or Earth Ranger to show the boundaries of the park, of our property, sorry, and then they explained it to the miners, and I think there was a bit of a back and forth, but eventually they were able to get rid of them. So we haven't really had that many incursions, and we do have like constant patrols from our like rangers as well, and we're currently thinking out ways that, because they have like data collection programs as well that are like long-term phenology and animal behavior studies, and we're currently working with them now to figure out the best way where they can do a patrol while collecting data at the same time, so it makes like data collection more efficient, and it also provides the concession with a more efficient method for protection and patrolling.
Thank you, Fan.